Welcome to Briefly Creative, a podcast that explores insights, stories, and frameworks for living a meaningful creative life. I'm your host, Greg Gunn. Welcome to the 10th episode of Briefly Creative. I know it doesn't seem like much, but I'm all for celebrating your wins, so huzzah! I'm also a big believer in the power of journaling. Writing my newsletter and podcast every week is my personal proof. In this episode, I want to take a few minutes to share my thoughts on the benefits of note-taking for both personal and professional growth and the tools that I use to do so. The ability to capture fleeting thoughts and sparkly ideas via written notes and then reflecting on them later is critical to my growth, and in my opinion, yours too. In short, note-taking is great. Here are a few practical use cases that come to mind on a more professional level. Meeting notes, brainstorming notes, process documentation, vision planning, and lots more where that came from. When I think about it, reading is kind of like time traveling through someone else's mind, or your own mind if you're reading your notes. For instance, when I review my notes, I can recall what I was thinking about and how I was feeling at that particular time. In that moment, it's kind of like me harvesting the bounty of word seeds I planted months or years ago. I really just wanted to say word seeds there. I think it sounds cool. Anyway, and if you're subscribed to my newsletter, you may recall an issue that I wrote about creating an achievement journal. And just a quick update, it is still going and fascinating to look through every week. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, then I'll share a link in the show notes. When I'm not designing, I'm usually writing, and I've tried many different writing apps: Google Docs, Dropbox Paper, IA Writer, Notion, Obsidian, and so on. And each had their pros and cons, but none really felt quite right to me. Now, the real problem was that I was looking for one product that could do it all and do it all well. And to its credit, Notion was the best contender. You can write and document, you can apply styles and organize and structure things like crazy. It really is a versatile piece of software. But there's just one thing: I can't stand writing in it. So what's a software nerd to do? Well, instead of putting all my words into one product basket, I decided to use 3 apps and play to their strengths. So here's my crazy setup. I use Notes, the Mac OS iOS native app, for quickly capturing ideas, no matter where I am. I use Obsidian for longer, deliberate writing and documentation. And then I use Notion to manage and structure everything. Now, I know that sounds kind of silly and crazy to use 3 apps to get one thing done, but it works for me. And like I've said before, I don't really care about doing it right. I care more about doing it well. And this works well. So let me tell you why Obsidian rules. But before I do, just know Obsidian is not sponsoring this glowing review that I'm about to give it. I'm just a big dork for it. And in fact, I didn't get Obsidian the first time I tried using it. I downloaded it, installed it, kind of played around with it, and then shrugged and uninstalled it. You see, Obsidian is beautiful but vast. You can use it however you'd like, and there is no real onboarding because there's no right or wrong way to use it. And if you feel intimidated, yeah, I was too. That's why I initially deleted it. But we are conditioned to use software that removes the need for thought. And it's not that Obsidian is difficult to use, it's that you can use it for anything and endlessly customize how it works for you. And that kind of universe of versatility takes some getting used to. It actually reminds me a lot of building a website before we had no-code apps. You'd have to think about structure and relationships and the intent for each page. How do things connect? And how do I organize all these things? What makes the most sense? I like to think about that kind of stuff. Plus, Obsidian is beautifully designed and as light as a feather. There's no bloat or lag. It's just super snappy, which leads me to the real reason that I use Obsidian over anything else. Unlike many other writing apps, Obsidian is a primarily offline app, meaning there is no server that your data is saving to or reading from. Everything is a local markdown file. Like, it's literally just a bunch of text files that are linked together, however you decide to link them. Kind of crazy. They do offer a paid syncing feature, but I don't feel the need to use it. Having control over where my stuff lives is important to me. And there's something to say for not relying on a platform that could evaporate or change at any given moment. Looking at you, X, the platform formerly known as Twitter. Case in point, I have roughly 34,000 followers on Instagram, and my average post reach is maybe a few hundred at best. So, what's in for 2024 for me? Platform agnostic content. Things like my website, this podcast, and my newsletter. And what's out for me in 2024? Trying to hack the algorithm. Thanks for joining me today. You can find more info, show notes, and a transcript of this episode at brieflycreative.fm. And if you enjoyed what you heard, consider rating and reviewing the show on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to it. It would mean the world to me and really help the show out. Also, we have a weekly newsletter. You can read more about the episode and find fun, relevant links to things like tutorials, tools, and other useful creative adjacent stuff that I find. Thanks again for listening, and remember, what worked for someone else may not work the same way for you, but there's always something to learn from it. See you next time.